Chapter 1. Red and Blue. Thomas Horton's taillight had been broken for exactly 3 days. Not because he couldn't afford to fix it. His architectural firm had just landed a contract designing a luxury resort in Sedona, but because his schedule had been packed with client meetings. He'd planned to swing by the auto shop Saturday morning. He never made it to Saturday morning as a free man. The patrol car's lights painted his rearview mirror in alternating crimson and sapphire. Thomas sighed, pulling onto the shoulder of Route 47, the empty desert highway that connected his isolated home to the nearest town 40 miles away. He lived alone by choice, in a glass and steel house he'd designed himself, perched on a mesa overlooking nothing but cactus and sky. After his parents died in a crash 5 years ago, his mother and father, the only family he'd ever known, he'd embraced solitude like a religion. Officer Roger Richardson approached with the standard swagger of small-town law enforcement. Thomas had his license and registration ready, window already down, hands visible on the steering wheel. He'd been through this drill before. "Evening, sir." "License," and Richardson's voice died mid-sentence as he scanned Thomas's license through his portable device. His entire demeanor shifted like someone had flipped a switch. His hand moved to his holster. "Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle immediately. Hands where I can see them." "What?" "Officer, I was just..." "Now." Richardson's gun was drawn, not pointed directly at him, but present, real, terrifying. "Hands up." Out of the vehicle, slowly. Thomas's mind raced through possibilities. Warrant? Mistaken identity? His heart hammered as he complied, the desert wind cold against his face despite the heat that lingered in the pavement. "Face the vehicle. Hands on the hood." Richardson's voice shook slightly. "Sir, your wife filed multiple reports 6 months ago. Detailed accounts of abuse. Against your children." The words didn't compute. They were sounds without meaning, syllables in the wrong order. "That's impossible," Thomas said, his voice steady despite the surreal nightmare unfolding. "I've never been married. I don't have children. I don't even have a girlfriend. There's been a mistake. The reports have your name, your address, your social security number," Richardson said, snapping handcuffs onto Thomas's wrists. "Photos, medical records, everything. You have the right to remain silent." The Miranda rights washed over him like white noise. Thomas's architect brain, trained to see problems in 3 dimensions, to anticipate structural failures before they happened, began working. This wasn't random. Someone had constructed this carefully, deliberately. The police station in Silver Creek was small, fluorescent lit, smelling of burnt coffee and industrial cleaner. They processed him with efficient detachment. Fingerprints, photos, personal effects sealed in a manila envelope. He was allowed 1 phone call. Thomas dialed Colin Fry, his business attorney, and left a terse message on voicemail. Then they put him in an interrogation room with beige walls and a metal table bolted to the floor. Detective Hugh Grant entered an hour later, carrying a thick folder. He was 50-ish, gray-tempered, with the weathered face of someone who'd seen every variation of human depravity. He sat across from Thomas and opened the folder like a surgeon beginning an autopsy. "Mr. Horton," Grant said, spreading photographs across the table. "These are your children. Emma, age 6. Lucas, age 4. Thomas stared at the images. 2 children with round faces and nervous smiles, photographed against a white wall like hostages. He'd never seen them before in his life. "These are not my children," Thomas said carefully. "I have never seen these children." Grant slid forward another document. A marriage certificate. Thomas William Horton and Chelsea and Marquez, married 3 years ago in Las Vegas. The signature was a decent forgery, close enough to his own that it would fool casual inspection. "This is fraud," Thomas said. "Someone has stolen my identity." Mrs. Horton filed reports with Child Protective Services 6 months ago, Grant continued, ignoring him. "She documented ongoing abuse. Physical, emotional. She has medical records from pediatricians, counseling sessions with a family therapist, photographs of bruises." He laid out more papers, each one another nail in an invisible coffin. "She has text messages from you. Threatening messages." Thomas's hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from controlled rage. Someone had built an entire false reality around him, brick by brick, document by document. "Where is this woman now?" "She and the children are in protective custody. You haven't been allowed any contact for 6 months, per the restraining order." Grant leaned back, studying Thomas's face. You seem genuinely surprised. Because I am. Because none of this is real. The paperwork is real. The marriage license is filed with the state of Nevada. The birth certificates list you as father. The bank accounts in your name, joint accounts with Chelsea Horton, those are real. The life insurance policies on those children, with you as beneficiary? Real. Thomas's architect brain caught on that last detail like a nail catching fabric. Life insurance on the children? Grant's eyes narrowed. $200,000 each. You took them out 18 months ago. I didn't, Thomas said. But whoever did this, that's their endgame. This isn't about custody or abuse. Someone is building a case to make me look like a monster. So when something happens to those children, you'd be the prime suspect, Grant finished. That's a hell of a theory, Mr. Horton. Run my fingerprints against the marriage license. Check the signature against my actual signature. Call my business partners. I can account for every day of the last 3 years. I've never been to Las Vegas except for a convention 2 years ago, and I was with colleagues the entire time. Thomas leaned forward, his voice dropping. Someone has framed me perfectly, detective. The question is why? Grant studied him for a long moment. Then he gathered the papers and stood. I'll verify your story, but you're staying here tonight. If even half of what you're saying is true, someone went to extraordinary lengths to destroy you. And I need to figure out if you're the victim. He paused at the door. Or if you're just a very good actor. The cell was small, cold, designed to break spirits. Thomas sat on the thin mattress and forced himself to think. Someone had stolen his identity with surgical precision. They'd created a fake marriage, fake children, fake abuse reports. But why? The life insurance was a clue, but it felt incomplete, like seeing only one corner of a blueprint. He closed his eyes and began to construct the problem like he would a building. Foundation first. Who had access to his personal information? Who knew enough about his isolated life to exploit it? Who stood to gain? Somewhere in Silver Creek, a woman named Chelsea Marquez was living in his name, playing wife to a ghost marriage, mother to children who might not even be real. And she was waiting for something. The insurance payout. The final move in whatever game she'd started. Thomas opened his eyes in the darkness. He'd spent his career designing spaces that trapped and released, that controlled movement and created surprises. Escape rooms, immersive experiences, architectural puzzles that challenged and delighted. Now he'd design a different kind of trap. One built from evidence and exposure, with walls made of truth and a door that only locked from the outside. Chelsea Marquez had made one critical mistake. She'd chosen to frame an architect. And architects understood better than anyone that every structure, no matter how solid it appeared, had a weakness. A point of failure. A place where pressure, applied precisely, could bring the whole thing crashing down. He just had to find it. Chapter 2. The Woman in the Mirror. Colin Fry arrived at 6 a.m. with expensive coffee and cheaper news. The attorney was 40, sharp-featured, with the predatory confidence of someone who billed by the 6-minute increment and knew his worth. Thomas had hired him 3 years ago to handle his business contracts. Now he was about to earn every dollar of his retainer. The marriage certificate is real, Colin said, spreading documents across the interview table where Grant had released Thomas on his own recognizance. Filed in Clark County, Nevada, September 2022. The license was properly notarized. Someone either forged your signature extremely well or they had someone who looked like me. Thomas finished. He'd been thinking about this all night. Did you get the surveillance footage from the marriage bureau? They only keep it for a year. It's gone. Colin pulled out his laptop. But I found something interesting. Chelsea and Marquez. Born in Phoenix, 1990. She has a record, minor fraud charges that never stuck, identity theft investigation that went nowhere. She's smart, Thomas. And she's not working alone. The screen showed a woman in her 30s with dark hair and calculating eyes. Pretty in a generic way that wouldn't stand out in a crowd. The kind of face you'd forget immediately after seeing it. Thomas studied her like he was examining a blueprint for flaws. Who else is involved? That's where it gets complicated. Colin pulled up another photo. Bradley Holland. Chelsea's actual husband, married to her legitimately in 2019. He has a record too: forgery, insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit identity theft. They're a team. They've been moving around the Southwest for 5 years, and wherever they go, strange things happen. Single men report identity theft. Bank accounts get drained. And then Chelsea and Bradley disappear before anyone can build a case. Thomas felt the pieces clicking together. They target isolated men. No family, no close relationships. People whose disappearance or destruction wouldn't immediately raise alarms. Exactly. And you fit the profile perfectly. Successful, wealthy, living alone in the middle of nowhere. Parents dead. No siblings. Your only regular contacts are business associates who wouldn't notice if you went silent for a while. How did they get my information? Colin pulled up another document. 3 years ago, you hired a company called Desert Solutions for your home security system. The technician who did the installation was Bradley Holland, working under a false name. He had access to everything. Your social security number, financial records, daily routines. He probably cloned your credit cards, photographed your documents, maybe even lifted fingerprints. Thomas remembered the installation. A young guy with friendly demeanor and efficient work. He'd let him wander the house freely, trusted him with the alarm codes. The memory made him feel sick and stupid, two emotions he wasn't accustomed to experiencing. So they've been planning this for 3 years? Building the foundation, Collins said. Creating the fake marriage, filing joint tax returns in your name, opening bank accounts, establishing a paper trail. The children, Emma and Lucas, they're real kids, but they're not yours. Best I can tell, they're foster kids that Chelsea has temporary custody of through a corrupt social worker. Names. Simone White. She works for Child Protective Services. She's placed kids with Chelsea 3 times in the past 2 years. The kids always come from troubled situations, no family support. And they always seem to have accidents. The bottom dropped out of Thomas's stomach. Accidents. One died in a house fire. Accidental, according to the investigation. Another drowned in a pool. Another fell downstairs. All ruled as tragic accidents. And each time, Chelsea was the grieving foster mother who collected insurance money and sympathy before moving to a new state. Thomas stood up, his hands clenched. So Emma and Lucas are probably in danger right now, Colin finished grimly. Chelsea's been setting up the abuse narrative for 6 months. She's established you as the monster father. She has medical records, photographs, witness testimony. And now you've been arrested. In a few weeks or months, when those children have an accident, who do you think the police will look at first? Me. Thomas began pacing, his mind racing through scenarios. Even if I prove the marriage is fake, I'm still the prime suspect. The insurance investigator will see motive. The prosecutor will see a pattern. And Chelsea walks away with $400,000 and a clean slate. Unless we stop her first. Colin closed his laptop. The problem is proving any of this. Chelsea is careful. She's been doing this for years without getting caught. Every document is legitimate enough to pass casual inspection. Every witness she's cultivated will testify that she's a devoted mother. And you're a single man with no alibi for the night you allegedly married her in Vegas. Thomas stopped pacing. An idea was forming. The way designs sometimes came to him fully formed, like pulling a blueprint from thin air. We don't need to prove she's guilty. We need to make her prove she's innocent. What do you mean? Chelsea thinks I'm trapped. She thinks I'll fight this through legal channels, hire lawyers, try to prove the marriage is fake. That's what she expects, a predictable response from a desperate man. But what if I don't fight? Colin frowned. You want to just accept that you're married to her? I want her to think I'm broken, Thomas said. Defeated, willing to do anything to make this go away. And then, when she comes to negotiate, and she will come, because there's money to be made here, I'll be waiting with a trap she never saw coming. That's dangerous. If she's planning to kill those kids, then we need to move faster. Thomas pulled out his phone. I need you to file a motion. I want to meet with Chelsea. Supervised, official, through the proper channels. I want to see my wife face to face. Colin looked dubious. The restraining order prevents any contact. I'm not going to violate it. You're going to argue that I have the right to confront my accuser, that there's evidence of fraud, and that a supervised meeting would clarify the situation. Judge Julius McDowell is handling the case. He's old school, believes in confrontation. He'll grant it. And when you meet her? Thomas smiled, but there was nothing warm in it. I'm going to offer her something she can't refuse. And when she takes the bait, I'm going to destroy her world piece by piece, the same way she tried to destroy mine. The meeting was arranged for 3 days later at the Child Protective Services office, with Simone White as the mediator. Thomas dressed carefully, button-down shirt, khakis, the kind of outfit that said, reasonable man trying to cooperate. He'd spent the intervening time studying everything Colin had gathered, Chelsea's history, Bradley's record, the patterns in their previous schemes. He'd also made some calls. Thomas's business specialized in experiential design, escape rooms, immersive theater, architectural puzzles. He knew people in unconventional fields. People who understood surveillance, documentation, digital forensics. People who operated in the gray areas of legality. By the time he walked into the CPS building, he'd assembled a team of his own. Chelsea Marquez was waiting in a conference room with industrial carpeting and motivational posters about family. She looked smaller in person, more fragile. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hands twisted in her lap. The performance was excellent. The traumatized wife, scared but brave. Simone White sat beside her, a woman in her 40s with a severe haircut and skeptical expression. "Mr. Horton," she said coldly, "I want to make clear that this meeting is highly irregular, given the allegations." "I understand," Thomas said, sitting across from Chelsea. He looked at her directly. "I want to apologize." Chelsea's eyes widened slightly. Good. That wasn't what she'd expected. "I've been going through my records," Thomas continued, his voice carefully modulated. "My memory of the last few years is unclear. I've been under tremendous stress with my business. I think it's possible that I've blocked out things. Traumatic things." He let his voice crack slightly. "When I saw those pictures of Emma and Lucas, I felt something. A recognition. And I realized that maybe I've been lying to myself." It was masterful fiction, delivered with architectural precision. Every word designed to build the structure Chelsea wanted to see. A guilty man breaking down, ready to confess. Chelsea glanced at Simone, then back to Thomas. "You're saying you remember us?" Her voice was small, hopeful. Also an act, but not as good as his. "I'm already bait," Thomas countered. "They've been planning to kill me for 3 years. At least this way, I control the situation." "No." Grant shook his head. "It's too dangerous. If something goes wrong, then 2 children die, and these people get away with murder." Again, Thomas met his eyes. "Detective, you told me you needed to figure out if I was a victim or an actor. I'm a victim, but I'm also the only person in position to stop this." Grant was silent for a long moment. "What exactly are you proposing?" "My house is a blank canvas. I designed it. I know every sight line and hiding place. We wire it for audio and video. You hide officers in the garage, the basement, wherever you need. When Chelsea and Bradley show up with the children, because they'll bring them, they need them for the final act. They'll incriminate themselves on camera. You'll have them for conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, fraud, everything. It's entrapment. It's self-defense. They're coming to kill me. I'm just making sure there are witnesses." Grant drummed his fingers on the desk. "I need approval from my captain. Warrants. Resources. You'd need probable cause," Colin interjected. He'd been sitting quietly in the corner. "Which Thomas can provide. He has evidence that Chelsea isn't his wife, that the children aren't his, and that he's been the victim of identity theft. That's enough to get surveillance authorized." Grant looked at Thomas. "You understand that if this goes wrong, you could die?" "I understand that if I do nothing, Emma and Lucas definitely die. And Chelsea moves on to her next victim. And the victim after that." Thomas's voice hardened. "I'm an architect, detective. I design spaces that control outcomes. Trust me, this will work." Finally, Grant nodded. "Okay, but we do this my way. My people, my rules. And if at any point I think those kids are in danger, we move in early." "Agreed." "Agreed." They spent the next 2 hours planning. Grant would get warrants based on the identity theft investigation. He'd place officers in the house before Chelsea arrived, hidden in the basement and garage. Thomas would wear a wire. The house would have cameras in every room. If Chelsea or Bradley said anything incriminating, anything at all, they'd be arrested on the spot. As they finalized the details, Thomas felt the familiar calm that came from solving a complex design problem. All the variables were accounted for. All the pieces were in place. But Gail pulled him aside as he was leaving. "Thomas, be careful. Chelsea is smart. If she smells a trap, she won't," he said, "because I'm going to give her exactly what she expects. A desperate man too weak to fight back. She'll never see the architect underneath." The week passed in careful preparation. Thomas liquidated assets publicly, making sure Chelsea knew the money was moving. He called her twice, his voice shaky and defeated, asking if she could forgive him. Each conversation strengthened her confidence, made her more certain that he was broken. Meanwhile, his team worked in silence. Gail documented Chelsea and Bradley's movements. The forensic accountant traced money flows back through all their previous schemes. And Thomas retrofitted his house, adding hidden cameras that looked like air vents, microphones embedded in light fixtures. By Wednesday night, everything was ready. Thursday morning dawned clear and cold. Grant's team arrived before sunrise, taking positions in the basement and garage. Thomas wore a wire under his shirt, nearly invisible. The cameras were live, recording to servers offsite. At 10 a.m., Chelsea's car pulled into the driveway. She got out, looking confident and beautiful in a sundress that suggested innocence. Bradley followed, taller and harder-edged. And in the back seat, visible through the window, were two small faces. Emma and Lucas. Thomas opened the door with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Welcome," he said. "I'm so glad you came." Chelsea kissed his cheek, her lips cold. "We're family," she said. "Family comes first." As they walked inside, Thomas thought, "You have no idea what you just walked into. But you're about to find out." The trap was set. Now he just had to spring it. Chapter 4. The Performance. Emma and Lucas looked terrified. They sat on Thomas's leather couch with the rigid posture of children who'd learned that stillness meant safety. Emma was older, maybe 7 despite the paperwork saying 6, with hollow eyes that had seen too much. Lucas clutched a stuffed rabbit with one ear missing, his thumb in his mouth despite being too old for it. Thomas's house was all glass and sharp angles, designed to blur the line between inside and outside. Morning light flooded through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the mesa. Chelsea walked through it like she owned the place, her fingers trailing across his custom furniture, his architectural models, calculating their worth. "Beautiful home," she said. "The kids and I could be very happy here." "I thought you'd take the money and find your own place," Thomas said carefully. The wire under his shirt felt like it was burning against his skin. In the basement, Grant and 3 other officers listened to every word. "Well," Chelsea settled into an armchair, crossing her legs. "I thought maybe we should try to make this marriage work. For the children's sake." Bradley stood by the window, his body language wrong for someone who was supposedly not part of this equation. Too possessive, too comfortable. He caught Thomas looking and smiled. Not friendly, but challenging. "This is Bradley Holland," Chelsea said smoothly. "He's been helping me out. A friend from church." "Church," Thomas repeated. "Right." He moved to the kitchen, open concept, visible from every angle, and started making coffee. The cameras hidden in the overhead lights captured everything. Emma whispered something to Lucas. The boy shook his head, clutching his rabbit tighter. "Emma, Lucas," Thomas said gently. "Would you like some juice?" "Cookies." Emma looked at Chelsea for permission. Chelsea nodded, her smile warm and maternal. "That's very kind of your father." The words hung in the air like poisoned honey. Your father. Building the narrative, reinforcing the lie, even now when she thought she'd won. Thomas brought juice boxes and a plate of cookies, store-bought, nothing that could be tampered with. He sat across from the children. "I've been looking at your pictures. You both like drawing." Emma nodded slightly. Lucas said nothing. "I'm an architect," Thomas continued. "I draw buildings. Maybe sometime you could show me your drawings." "We won't be doing that," Chelsea interjected. "Given the circumstances. But it's sweet that you're trying." Bradley snorted from his position by the window. "This whole thing is sweet. Rich guy trying to buy back his soul." "Bradley." Chelsea's voice held a warning. "What? That's what this is. He knows what he did. He's trying to make it right with money." Bradley walked closer, invading Thomas's space. "But you can't buy back what you did to these kids, can you? Can't buy back the nightmares. The fear." Thomas met his eyes. "No, I can't." "Damn right." Bradley was enjoying this, the power dynamic. The thrill of intimidating someone he thought was broken. "So you're going to sign over everything, like you promised. And then you're going to disappear. Let Chelsea raise these kids in peace." This wasn't in the script. Chelsea looked irritated. Bradley was pushing too hard, revealing too much. But Thomas saw the opening, the crack in their facade. "I'll sign whatever you want," Thomas said. "I just want to understand something first." "Understand what?" Chelsea's voice was cautious now. "How you did it. How you built all this." Thomas gestured at the papers spread on his coffee table, the forged marriage certificate, the fake documentation. It's impressive work. The attention to detail. The patience. Chelsea's expression shifted, flattered despite herself. It wasn't that hard. You made it easy. How so? You're alone. No family, no close friends. You live out here like a hermit. When Bradley installed your security system 3 years ago, we knew you were perfect. She was warming to the topic, unable to resist explaining her cleverness. All those records, just sitting in your house. Social security card, birth certificate, passport. Bradley photographed everything. While I was there, you went to make him coffee, Bradley said. Took me 15 minutes to clone everything. You didn't even notice. Thomas nodded slowly, drawing them out. And the marriage? How did you forge that? We hired someone who looked like you. Actor type, down on his luck. Gave him $2,000 to play the groom in Vegas. Took an hour. Chelsea laughed. The clerk barely looked at his face. She was more interested in her phone. Smart, Thomas said. And the kids? The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. What about the kids? Chelsea's voice was flat now. Where did you find them? How did you explain to Emma and Lucas that they suddenly had a father they'd never met? Emma's head snapped up at that. Her eyes met Thomas's, and he saw the flicker of hope, or maybe recognition. She knew. The girl knew something was wrong. That's not your concern, Chelsea said. I think it is. Thomas stood up. Because I've been thinking about the story you built. It's elegant. Beautiful even. Like good architecture. But every building has a foundation, and I'm curious about yours. Bradley moved faster than Thomas expected, crossing the room in 3 strides, getting in his face. You asked too many questions. Bradley, stop. Chelsea stood, her composure cracking. Thomas, I think we should just sign the papers, Anne. And what? Thomas didn't back down. You take the money and disappear? Or do you have something else planned? The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Then Lucas started crying, quiet, hitching sobs that he tried to muffle in his rabbit. Emma put her arm around him, and the look she gave Chelsea was pure hatred. I want to go home, Lucas whispered. I want my real mom. Chelsea moved fast, grabbing Lucas by the arm. You are home, and I am your mother. Stop crying. Let him go. Thomas's voice cut through the room. Excuse me. I said let him go. Thomas stepped forward. You're hurting him. Bradley shoved Thomas back. Sit down and shut up. That's when the door to the basement opened and Detective Grant stepped out, his weapon drawn. Bradley Holland, step away from Thomas Horton. Chelsea Marquez, let go of the child. Now. 2 more officers emerged from the garage, weapons drawn. Chelsea's face went white, then red. She released Lucas, who ran to Emma. The girl wrapped her arms around her brother, both of them shaking. What is this? Chelsea's voice was shrill. What the hell is this? This is the end of your game, Grant said. Chelsea Marquez and Bradley Holland, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, child endangerment, and about a dozen other charges we're going to add once we finish the investigation. Bradley lunged at Thomas, pure rage, not thinking. Thomas sidestepped easily, and 2 officers tackled Bradley to the floor. He went down hard, cursing. Chelsea was smarter. She didn't fight, just stood there with her hands up, her mind visibly racing. This won't stick. You can't prove anything. We have you on tape, Grant said, signaling an officer to cuff her. Admitting to identity fraud, forgery, conspiracy. And that's just from the last 20 minutes. Illegally obtained. Actually, Colin Fry stepped into the room from where he'd been waiting outside. Mr. Horton was wearing a wire with his full consent, in his own home, after receiving threats. Everything we recorded is completely legal and admissible in court. Thomas watched Chelsea's face as understanding hit. She'd walked into his house thinking she was the predator. She'd explained everything, bragged about her cleverness, all while cameras and microphones documented every word. She looked at Thomas, and he saw the moment she realized. You played me. No, Thomas said quietly. I designed a space where the truth could come out. You're the one who chose to fill it with confessions. As the officers led Chelsea and Bradley out in handcuffs, Thomas knelt in front of Emma and Lucas. They were still crying, still terrified. You're safe now, he said. No one's going to hurt you anymore. Emma looked at him with those 2 old eyes. Are you really our father? No, Thomas said gently. I'm not. But I'm going to make sure you get back to people who actually care about you. The officers had called CPS, real CPS, not Simone White, who was currently being arrested at her office for conspiracy. A social worker arrived within the hour, someone Grant trusted, who took Emma and Lucas to a safe location. As they left, Emma looked back at Thomas. "Thank you," she mouthed. He nodded. The children were safe. That was phase 1. But Thomas wasn't done. Not even close. Chapter 5, The Network. Simone White's arrest made the local news, but the full story didn't break immediately. Detective Grant was building his case carefully, layer by layer, not wanting to spook the other players who might be involved. Thomas met him 3 days later at the same diner where he'd met with Gail Estrada. "We have a problem," Grant said without preamble. "Chelsea and Bradley aren't talking." They both lawyered up immediately. Public defenders, competent ones. "Without their cooperation, we can prove the identity theft and conspiracy, but not the murders." "What about the children who died?" Thomas asked. "Marcus, the others?" "Circumstantial. We have suspicious deaths in 3 different states, but the original investigations ruled them accidental. Getting those cases reopened will take months, maybe years. And in the meantime, Chelsea and Bradley will cut a deal." Grant looked exhausted. Best case scenario, they do 5 to 7 years. Then they're out, and they start over with new identities, new victims. Thomas's jaw tightened. "That's not justice." "No, it's not. But it's how the system works." "Then maybe," Thomas said slowly, "we need to work outside the system." Grant's eyes narrowed. "Thomas, I'm a cop. I can't." "I know. You can't. But I can." Thomas pulled out his phone, showing Grant a series of documents Gail had compiled. "Chelsea and Bradley are part of a larger network. It's not just them and Simone. There are at least 6 other people involved. Fake identity creators, corrupt social workers in 2 other states, a lawyer in Phoenix who specializes in expediting foster placements, and someone in the Nevada Marriage Bureau who's been processing fraudulent marriages for years." "How did you find this?" "Gail Estrada is very good at her job, and I paid her a lot of money to be thorough." Thomas spread the documents on the table. "This network has been operating for at least a decade. They've processed over 50 fraudulent marriages, stolen millions in assets, and..." He paused. "We can trace connections to at least 15 suspicious deaths of children in their care." Grant stared at the documents. 15 children. Maybe more. Gail's still digging. Thomas leaned forward. "Here's what I'm proposing. You keep building your case against Chelsea, Bradley, and Simone. Make it airtight. But you let me handle the others." "Handle them how?" "By destroying their lives the way they destroyed their victims' lives. By exposing them. By making sure everyone knows what they've done. That's vigilante justice." "No," Thomas said. "It's public information. Everything I'm going to do is legal. I'm going to find every victim they've created, every document they've forged, every crime they've committed. And I'm going to make it all very, very public." Grant was silent for a long moment. "You're talking about ruining people." "I'm talking about justice for 15 dead children who never got a voice." Finally, Grant nodded. "I can't officially support this. But I can't stop you from conducting your own investigation as a victim of identity theft. And if you happen to find information that leads to criminal charges in other jurisdictions..." He shrugged. "That's how good citizenship works." Thomas smiled. "Thank you, Detective." The lawyer in Phoenix was named Roger Richardson, no relation to the officer who'd arrested Thomas, just a coincidental shared name. He ran a small practice specializing in family law, specifically foster care and adoption. On paper, he looked legitimate. But Gail had found the connections, shell companies, offshore accounts, and a pattern of expedited placements that always seemed to benefit parents who later collected substantial insurance payments. Thomas drove to Phoenix on a Tuesday morning. He'd scheduled an appointment under a false name, claiming he wanted to discuss adopting a child. Richardson's office was in a strip mall between a nail salon and a taco shop, cheap rent, low profile. Richardson was 50, balding, with the oily smile of someone who'd spent years perfecting insincere charm. "Mr. Morrison," he greeted Thomas, using the fake name. "Please sit. Tell me what brings you here." "I'm looking to adopt," Thomas said. "But I've had some complications with my background check. I was hoping you could help expedite the process." Richardson's eyes gleamed. "I specialize in difficult cases." "What kind of complications are we talking about?" "Nothing serious. Just some financial issues in my past. Bankruptcy, that kind of thing. But I have resources now, and I really want to give a child a good home." Of course. Richardson pulled out forms. The standard adoption process can take years. But with the right motivation, we can sometimes accelerate things. There are children in difficult situations who need immediate placement. Motivation, meaning money? Meaning appropriate fees for expedited services. Richardson slid a paper across the desk. My consultation rate is $10,000. If I can help you, and I'm confident I can, there would be additional fees for the placement, documentation, and ensuring all legal requirements are satisfied. Thomas pretended to consider. How much total? $50,000. Cash. And you'd have a child placed with you within a month. A month? That's fast. I have connections with Child Protective Services. There are always children who need homes urgently. Richardson leaned back, confident. Children from troubled backgrounds. No family support. The kind of cases where social workers are happy to place them quickly with financially stable parents. Thomas recorded every word on his phone, positioned on the desk like he was just checking messages. And these children, they come with all the proper documentation. Everything you need. Birth certificates, medical records, even backdated photographs for your photo albums. We create a complete history. For $50,000. It's a bargain, really. Adopting through official channels costs almost as much in legal fees and takes years. My way is faster, cleaner. Richardson smiled. And more profitable for everyone involved. Thomas stood up. Thank you for your time, Mr. Richardson. I'll need to think about this. Of course. But don't wait too long. These opportunities don't last. As Thomas walked out, he texted Gail, got him on tape. Send the package. The package was a detailed dossier Gail had compiled. Every illegal adoption Richardson had facilitated, every fraudulent document he'd filed, every dollar that had passed through his offshore accounts. Within an hour, copies would be on the desks of the Arizona Bar Association, the FBI, and 3 major newspapers. Richardson would be destroyed by morning. His law license revoked, his practice shuttered, and criminal charges filed. It wouldn't bring back the children who died, but it would stop him from creating new victims. 1 down. 5 to go. The corrupt social worker in New Mexico was named Daphne Stokes. She'd been placing children with Chelsea's network for 3 years, taking $20,000 per placement. Gail tracked her to a coffee shop in Albuquerque where she was meeting with a woman who looked nervous, probably another foster parent in the network. Thomas didn't approach Daphne directly. Instead, he'd hired a journalist, a woman named Joanne Long who specialized in investigative reporting on child welfare fraud. Thomas had given her everything: financial records, placement documents, the connection to suspicious child deaths. Joanne's article broke the next Tuesday in the Albuquerque Journal. The headline read, CPS worker accused of selling children in a legal adoption ring. It was thorough, damning, and completely factual. Every source was verified, every claim documented. By Wednesday, Daphne Stokes was in custody, facing federal charges. 2 down. The identity forger in Las Vegas was harder. He operated under multiple names, changing identities like clothes. But Gail found him through financial patterns, Bitcoin transactions, offshore accounts, the digital breadcrumbs he couldn't completely erase. Thomas didn't need to confront him. He just needed to expose him. A single anonymous tip to the FBI's cybercrime division, backed by comprehensive evidence, was enough. Agents raided the forger's apartment at 6 a.m. on a Thursday. They found thousands of fake IDs, forged documents, and a client list that read like a who's who of criminal enterprises. 3 down. The corrupt clerk at the Nevada Marriage Bureau was named Aldo Lang. He'd been processing fraudulent marriages for a decade, taking $500 per fake certificate. Thomas visited Las Vegas personally for this one. The Nevada State Attorney General's office was interested in prosecuting corruption. Thomas had an appointment with a prosecutor named Neville Snow, who'd made his career going after public officials. Mr. Horton, Snow said, shaking his hand. I understand you have information about marriage fraud? Thomas laid out everything. The fake marriage to Chelsea, the clerk who'd processed it without proper verification, the pattern of fraudulent marriages over 10 years. Aldo Lang has facilitated at least 200 illegal marriages. Each one was a predicate for larger crimes: identity theft, fraud, money laundering. Snow's eyes widened as he reviewed the documents. This is substantial. How did you compile this? I hired investigators. After I discovered what happened to me, I wanted to understand the full scope. And you're willing to testify? Absolutely. Snow leaned back. Mr. Horton, what you've brought me could take down an entire criminal network. Give me 2 weeks. Aldo Lang will be in custody, and we'll flip him to get to his co-conspirators. For down. The remaining 2 network members were social workers in California and Oregon. Thomas used the same playbook. Comprehensive dossiers delivered to prosecutors, journalists, and law enforcement. Within a month, both were under investigation. Within 2 months, both were arrested. 6 down. Network destroyed. Thomas met with Detective Grant one final time before the trials began. You did good work, Grant said, though his expression was complicated, part admiration, part concern. But you made a lot of enemies. They made enemies first, Thomas replied. I just made sure those enemies had names and faces and criminal records. Chelsea's lawyer is claiming you orchestrated a conspiracy to frame her. That you're the real criminal here. Thomas smiled. Let her try to prove it. Every person I exposed had committed actual crimes. Every document I provided was legitimate. I didn't frame anyone. I just turned on the lights. Grant nodded slowly. The trial starts next month. Chelsea, Bradley, and Simone are all facing 30-plus charges. They're looking at 20 years minimum. And the children? Emma and Lucas. Safe. Reunited with their biological mother. Turns out she'd been looking for them for 2 years after Chelsea convinced CPS they were being abused in her care. Thomas felt something ease in his chest. Good. That's good. What about you? Grant asked. What happens now? Thomas looked out the window of Grant's office, toward the distant mesa where his glass house stood. Now I go back to my life. Design buildings. Create spaces. Try to remember that not everyone is a predator. But he knew that wasn't entirely true. Thomas had discovered something about himself in the past 2 months. He was good at revenge. Good at dismantling complex criminal structures. Good at finding weaknesses and exploiting them. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he was already thinking about the next problem, the next injustice that needed an architect's precision to solve. But that was for later. For now, there was still one more thing to do. Chapter 6, The Reckoning. The trial of Chelsea Marquez, Bradley Holland, and Simone White became a media sensation. The marriage fraud ring, the newspapers called it, though that felt inadequate to Thomas. It wasn't just fraud. It was systematic predation, engineered suffering, calculated murder disguised as tragedy. Judge Julius McDowell presided, a man in his 70s with steel-gray hair and no patience for legal theatrics. The courtroom was packed every day, reporters, victims' families, and true crime enthusiasts who treated the proceedings like entertainment. Thomas attended every session, sitting in the back row, watching. Chelsea's defense attorney was a woman named Alice Gilmore, expensive and competent. She'd built a strategy around reasonable doubt, arguing that Thomas was a vengeful ex-husband who'd manufactured evidence to destroy his former wife. It was a bold lie, requiring Chelsea to admit to the marriage while denying everything else. Mrs. Horton, Gilmore addressed Chelsea on the stand, carefully using the married name. Can you explain to the jury how your husband has misrepresented your relationship? Chelsea looked smaller in her prison jumpsuit, her hair pulled back, no makeup. She'd perfected the wounded victim expression. Thomas and I had problems. Every marriage does. But when I filed for separation and sought custody of our children, he became vindictive. He wanted to destroy me. By fabricating evidence of a criminal conspiracy? Yes. He hired investigators to twist the truth, to make it look like I was someone I'm not. It was a masterful performance. Several jurors looked sympathetic. Then the prosecution called their first witness, Emma. The girl was 8 years old, her real age finally confirmed. She wore a blue dress and looked terrified, her hand clutching the hand of a therapist who sat beside her. The judge had allowed special accommodations for her testimony. The prosecutor, a man named Ellsworth Rasmussen, approached gently. Emma, can you tell us who Chelsea Marquez is? Emma's voice was barely audible. She took me. Took you from where? From my mom. She said my mom was bad, that she couldn't take care of me. But it wasn't true. Tears streamed down Emma's face. She kept me in a house with a man named Bradley. They yelled a lot. They made us do things. What kind of things? They took pictures of us with bruises. They said we had to lie and say our dad hurt us. But we didn't have a dad. Chelsea's attorney objected, claiming hearsay, manipulation. But the judge allowed the testimony to continue. Emma, Rasmussen said quietly, Did Chelsea ever hurt you? The girl nodded. She hit us when we didn't do what she said. And Emma's voice broke. She said if we told anyone, something bad would happen. Like what happened to Marcus. Who was Marcus? Another kid who stayed with Chelsea. He died in a fire. Chelsea said it was an accident, but Lucas and I knew. We knew she did it. The courtroom erupted. The judge called for order. Chelsea's face had gone pale, her mask slipping for the first time. The prosecution's case was overwhelming. They called forensic accountants who traced money through shell companies. They called previous victims of Chelsea and Bradley's schemes. Men who'd had their identities stolen, their lives destroyed. They called fire investigators who testified that Marcus's death was suspicious, that the evidence suggested arson. And they called Thomas. He took the stand on the 12th day of the trial. Rasmussen walked him through everything. The arrest, the discovery, the fake marriage certificate. Thomas kept his voice even, factual, letting the evidence speak. Then Gilmore cross-examined him. Mr. Horton, she said, circling like a predator, you expect this jury to believe that you never married my client? Never had children with her? That's not what I expect, Thomas replied. That's what the evidence proves. Forensic analysis of the marriage certificate shows the signature isn't mine. DNA testing proves Emma and Lucas aren't my biological children. And records from my business show I was in 3 different states during the time I supposedly married your client in Las Vegas. Or perhaps you hired someone to pretend to be you. Why would I do that? To create an alibi? To distance yourself from a relationship that became inconvenient? Gilmore's voice rose. Isn't it true, Mr. Horton, that you're a wealthy man with significant assets? I'm financially comfortable, yes. And isn't it true that in a divorce, your wife would be entitled to half those assets? If I had a wife, hypothetically, yes. So you had motive to destroy her, to fabricate this entire conspiracy theory to avoid paying what you owed. Thomas leaned forward. Ms. Gilmore, your client stole my identity. She created a fake marriage, fake children, fake abuse reports. She attempted to defraud me of $3 million. And based on the evidence presented by the prosecution, she's responsible for the deaths of multiple children in her care. I didn't need to fabricate anything. The truth was damning enough. Gilmore tried several more angles, but Thomas didn't budge. He'd spent his career designing complex structures. He understood how to defend them under pressure. When he stepped down, he caught Chelsea's eyes. She was looking at him with pure hatred, the mask finally gone. Good. Let the jury see what she really was. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Bradley's attorney tried to claim he was merely Chelsea's dupe, following her lead. Simone's attorney argued she'd been misled, that she didn't know about the insurance fraud or the deaths. None of it mattered. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous on all counts. Chelsea Marquez, guilty on 47 charges including conspiracy to commit murder, identity theft, fraud, child endangerment, and falsifying government documents. Bradley Holland, guilty on 39 charges. Simone White, guilty on 28 charges. The sentencing came a month later. Judge McDowell looked at the defendants with unconcealed disgust. What you 3 have done, he said, his voice echoing through the silent courtroom, represents one of the most calculated, cruel conspiracies this court has ever seen. You preyed on vulnerable children. You destroyed innocent lives. You murdered with planning and premeditation, then walked away as if you'd done nothing wrong. He sentenced Chelsea to life in prison without possibility of parole. Bradley got 45 years. Simone got 35. As the bailiffs led them away, Chelsea turned one last time to look at Thomas. Her lips moved, forming words he could read. This isn't over. But it was. For her, at least. After the sentencing, Thomas stood outside the courthouse in the bright Arizona sun. Gail Estrada joined him, lighting a cigarette. Feels good, doesn't it? She said. Justice. It feels necessary, Thomas replied. Not quite the same thing. What will you do now? Go home. Work. Try to forget. But even as he said it, he knew that wasn't entirely true. He'd changed over the past months. The isolated architect who'd lived alone on a mesa, designing buildings and avoiding human contact, that person was gone. In his place was someone who understood how to fight, how to expose, how to tear down structures of lies and replace them with truth. His phone buzzed. A text from Detective Grant. New case came across my desk. Identity theft ring, targeting elderly victims. Might need an architect's perspective. Interested? Thomas stared at the message for a long moment. Then he typed back, "Send me the files." Gail saw his expression and smiled. "Careful, Thomas. You might develop a taste for this." "Maybe," he admitted. "Or maybe I just learned that sometimes the best revenge is making sure the predators can't hunt anymore." He walked to his car, the desert heat shimmering off the pavement. Behind him, the courthouse stood as a monument to justice. Imperfect, slow, but ultimately effective. And ahead of him, back home on his mesa, waited the glass house where it had all begun. The trap that had caught Chelsea Marquez. The space he'd designed to expose the truth. Thomas Horton had always been an architect. He'd just never realized before that some of the most important structures weren't built from steel and glass. They were built from evidence, exposure, and the precise application of pressure to weak points. And he was very, very good at finding weak points. Chapter 7. Ghost in the Glass. 6 months after the trial, Thomas's life should have returned to normal. His business was thriving. The Sedona Resort project had been completed to rave reviews, and 3 new clients had signed contracts. His reputation in architectural circles had actually improved. The media attention from the trial had brought unexpected publicity, positioning him as a survivor who'd overcome adversity. But normalcy felt like a lie he was living. Thomas stood in his glass house at 3 a.m., unable to sleep, watching the desert night through floor-to-ceiling windows. The house he'd designed to blur the line between inside and outside now felt exposed, vulnerable. He'd added security cameras, reinforced locks, motion sensors. Gail had suggested a panic room. He'd laughed at the time, but lately the idea seemed less paranoid. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Enjoying your victory?" See. Thomas's blood went cold. Chelsea was in prison, maximum security. She shouldn't have access to a phone. But he'd learned the hard way that people like her found ways. He screenshotted the text and forwarded it to Detective Grant, then blocked the number. It was the 7th threatening message he'd received in 3 months. Grant had investigated each one. The texts came from burner phones, bounced through VPNs, impossible to trace definitively. "She has friends on the outside," Grant had told him. "People who worked with her network who we haven't caught yet. They're angry. Should I be worried? Honestly, I don't know. Chelsea is locked up for life. She can't touch you directly." But Grant had hesitated. "Be careful, Thomas." Now, standing in his glass house in the darkness, Thomas wondered if he'd made a mistake. Not in exposing Chelsea. That had been necessary, the right thing to do. But in the way he'd lived afterward. He'd returned to his isolated life, thinking the victory meant safety. Maybe isolation wasn't protection. Maybe it was vulnerability. His phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. This time, not a text, a video message. Thomas almost didn't open it. Then his architect's curiosity overrode his caution. He needed to know what he was dealing with. The video was short, grainy, shot in a prison visiting room. Chelsea sat across from someone whose face was carefully kept out of frame. But her voice was clear. "Tell him I said hello. Tell him the walls he built aren't as strong as he thinks. Tell him." She smiled, and the expression was chilling. "Tell him an architect should know that every structure has a weakness. You just have to know where to push." The video ended. Thomas stood very still, his mind working through the implications. This wasn't just harassment. This was a threat, specific and intentional. Chelsea was telling him she'd found something, a weakness in his defenses, a vulnerability he'd overlooked. But what? He spent the next 3 hours going through everything. His security system, his financial records, his business contacts. Looking for the weakness Chelsea had found. By dawn, he'd discovered it. There was a pattern in his recent client acquisitions. 3 new projects, all coming through a single referral source. A boutique architecture firm in Santa Fe that specialized in connecting designers with high-end clients. Thomas had been grateful for the referrals, hadn't questioned them. Now he dug deeper. The firm was called Elevation Design Group. It had been established 18 months ago. The principal was listed as Hattie Brady. Thomas ran the name through every database he could access. Hattie Brady existed, social media, professional licensing, even a few published articles about architectural trends. But when he looked closer, the details were thin. The social media accounts had been created a year ago. The professional license was legitimate, but recently issued. The articles were real, but published in obscure journals. Hattie Brady was a manufactured identity. Thomas called Gail at 7 a.m. She answered on the second ring, alert despite the early hour. "What's wrong?" "Chelsea's network isn't dismantled," he said. "It's regrouping. And I think someone is still targeting me." He explained about Elevation Design Group, about Hattie Brady, about the suspicious referrals. Gail was silent for a moment. "I'll look into it. Don't sign anything from those clients. Don't meet with anyone from that firm. And Thomas? Watch your back." By noon, Gail had confirmed Thomas's suspicions. Elevation Design Group was a front company. Hattie Brady was an alias for someone named Bianca Hunt, who had ties to Bradley Holland, a cousin, once removed. The three clients who'd been referred to Thomas were real, but their projects were designed to give Bianca access to Thomas's business operations, his financial information, his daily schedule. "What's the endgame?" Thomas asked. "I don't know yet," Gail admitted. "But whatever Chelsea's planning, it's elaborate. She's had people on the outside preparing this for months, maybe longer." Thomas thought about Chelsea's message. Every structure has a weakness. You just have to know where to push. What was his weakness? His business? His house? His isolation? Then it hit him. Emma and Lucas. What about them? They're the witnesses who convicted Chelsea. 8-year-old Emma testified against her. If something happened to those kids, Thomas's stomach churned. Chelsea gets her revenge and eliminates the witnesses who put her away. 2 birds, 1 stone. Gail cursed. Where are the kids now? Witness protection, supposedly. Reunited with their biological mother. Location undisclosed. Find them, Gail said. Right now? Because if we figured this out, Chelsea's people already have. Thomas called Detective Grant, who made calls to federal marshals, who made calls to the Witness Protection Division. It took 4 hours of bureaucratic runaround before Grant called back with news that made Thomas's blood run cold. Emma, Lucas, and their mother haven't checked in for their weekly call. They missed it 3 days ago. 3 days, Thomas repeated. And nobody noticed? The system has gaps, Grant said grimly. Budget cuts, overworked marshals. The family was supposed to be low priority. Chelsea's in prison. The threat level was considered minimal. Where were they relocated? Oregon. Small town outside Portland. I'm sending you the address. But Thomas, the marshals are handling this. You don't need to. Thomas hung up and was already moving, grabbing keys, wallet, phone. His truck was in the driveway. Portland was a 15-hour drive. He could be there by morning. As he drove, he called Gail. I need you to track Bianca Hunt's movements. Find out if she's in Oregon. Already on it, Gail said. And Thomas, don't do anything stupid. Define stupid. Going alone to confront criminals who've already killed multiple children. I'm not confronting anyone, Thomas said. I'm just going to find Emma and Lucas before someone else does. But he was lying, and they both knew it. The Oregon town was called Timber Creek, population 3,000. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where a strange face stood out immediately. Thomas arrived at 4 a.m., exhausted from the drive, running on adrenaline and gas station coffee. The address Grant had given him was a small house on a quiet street, backed by dense forest. Thomas parked 3 blocks away and approached on foot, moving carefully in the pre-dawn darkness. The house was dark, no cars in the driveway. The grass needed mowing, and newspapers had accumulated on the porch, signs of absence, of abandonment. Thomas picked the lock on the back door, a skill Gail had taught him months ago, saying just in case. The house was empty, not just vacant, but evacuated. Furniture was present, but personal items were gone. No clothes in the closets, no food in the refrigerator. Emma, Lucas, and their mother had left in a hurry. Or been taken. Thomas found what he was looking for in the kitchen, a note, half burned in the sink. Only part of it was legible. Saw her. We need to leave now. Going to, the rest was ash. So Emma's mother had seen someone. Recognized a threat. Fled before whatever Chelsea's network had planned could happen. But where had they gone? Thomas searched the house systematically, looking for clues. In Emma's room, sparsely furnished, clearly temporary, he found a drawing tacked to the wall. A child's sketch of a house by a lake, with pine trees and mountains in the background. In careful letters, Emma had written, Grandma's place. Emma's mother had gone to her mother. To Emma and Lucas's grandmother, wherever she lived. Thomas took the drawing and left the house. As he walked back to his truck, he saw a car parked on the street that hadn't been there before. a sedan with rental plates. And inside, a woman with dark hair, watching him through binoculars. Bianca Hunt. Their eyes met. She smiled, then started her car and pulled away, heading north toward the highway. Thomas ran for his truck. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Chapter 8. The Lake House. Thomas followed Bianca north on Highway 101, maintaining enough distance that she wouldn't spot him, but staying close enough not to lose her. She drove fast, confident, like someone with a destination and a deadline. After 3 hours, she turned off the highway onto a two-lane road that wound through dense forest. Thomas's GPS showed they were approaching Crater Lake, a remote area of southern Oregon known for its deep blue waters and isolated vacation homes. Emma's drawing. Grandma's place. A house by a lake. Bianca was hunting them, and Thomas was hunting Bianca. The road narrowed, becoming gravel, then dirt. Expensive rental sedan struggling with the terrain. Thomas held back, letting her gain distance, then followed on foot after parking his truck behind a screen of trees. The lake appeared through breaks in the forest, pristine, eerily beautiful, surrounded by mountains. And on the eastern shore, a small house with smoke curling from its chimney. Bianca's car was parked 50 yards from the house, hidden behind an outcropping of rock. She was sitting inside, watching the house through binoculars, patient as a predator. Thomas circled wide, moving through the forest. Years of hiking had taught him how to move quietly. He approached the house from the side, away from Bianca's line of sight. Through the window, he could see them, Emma and Lucas, playing cards at a kitchen table with a woman in her 60s, their grandmother. They looked relaxed, safe, unaware of the danger waiting just outside. Thomas needed to warn them, but approaching the front door would expose him to Bianca. He needed a different strategy. He pulled out his phone and called the local sheriff's department. "I need to report a suspicious person near Crater Lake," he said, giving the approximate location. "Woman in a rental car, surveilling a private residence. I think she might be planning a break-in." The dispatcher said someone would check it out. Thomas hung up and waited. 30 minutes later, a sheriff's cruiser appeared on the dirt road. Bianca saw it coming and made a choice. She started her car and drove away quickly, not wanting to be questioned. The cruiser followed her out, and Thomas seized the moment. He approached the house and knocked. Emma's grandmother answered, suspicious. "Can I help you?" "My name is Thomas Horton." I know who you are," she said. Her name was Susan Fletcher, according to the mailbox. "You're the man who saved Emma and Lucas." "They're in danger," Thomas said. "The woman who hurt them, Chelsea Marquez, she has people looking for them. One was just outside your house." Susan's face went pale. She let Thomas inside. Emma and Lucas were staring at him, recognition dawning. "Emma," Thomas said gently, "I need you to tell me. Did your mother see someone before you left Timber Creek? Someone who scared her?" Emma nodded. "A woman with dark hair. She was taking pictures of our house." "Bianca Hunt," Thomas said. "She works for Chelsea. How long have you been here?" 2 days, Susan said. "My daughter, Emma's mother, Kendra, she's in town getting supplies. She should be back soon." Thomas checked his watch. Bianca would return. The sheriff had driven her off temporarily, but she wouldn't give up. Chelsea's network was too invested in silencing these witnesses. "We need to leave," Thomas said. "All of you? Right now? Where?" "Somewhere Bianca can't find you." Thomas pulled out his phone and called Gail. "I need an emergency safe house. Somewhere off the grid. And I need transport that can't be traced." Gail worked fast. Within an hour, she'd arranged for a cabin deep in the Cascade Mountains, owned by a friend who asked no questions. And she'd sent a driver, a retired federal marshal named Wally Acevedo, who specialized in witness protection. Wally arrived in a nondescript SUV with tinted windows. "Let's move," he said. "We have maybe 30 minutes before that woman comes back with friends." They packed quickly, Susan, Emma, and Lucas gathering essentials. When Kendra returned from town, she was terrified but compliant. "I knew we couldn't stay here," she said. "I knew Chelsea wouldn't stop." "She won't," Thomas agreed. "But we're going to end this. Today." As Wally drove them away, Thomas stayed behind. He had one more thing to do. He set a trap. Thomas waited in Susan's house as darkness fell. He'd positioned himself where he could watch both the front and back entrances. He'd disabled the lights to make the house look abandoned. And he'd called Detective Grant to explain what he was doing. "This is insane," Grant said. "You're using yourself as bait." I'm finishing what Chelsea started, Thomas replied. She sent Bianca to kill those kids. I'm going to make sure Bianca goes to prison instead. Thomas, if she's armed, then I'll be ready. He hung up before Grant could argue further. The detective would send backup, but it would take hours. By then, this would be over. Bianca returned at midnight. Thomas watched through the window as she parked her rental car in the same spot as before. But this time, she wasn't alone. Two men were with her, hired muscle, there to do the killing Bianca couldn't do herself. They approached the house carefully, checking windows, testing doors. When they found the back door unlocked, they entered. Thomas let them get inside, let them spread through the house, searching for victims who weren't there. Then he turned on the lights. Looking for someone, he said. Bianca and her two companions spun around, caught flat-footed. One of the men reached for a gun, but Thomas had anticipated that. He'd positioned himself behind cover, with a clear line to the exit. And he wasn't alone. Gail stepped out from the kitchen, holding a shotgun with professional ease. Don't, she said calmly. I really don't want to shoot you, but I really will. The men froze. Bianca's face twisted with rage. You interfering bastard. Chelsea told me you'd be a problem. Chelsea was right, Thomas said. But here's what she didn't tell you. I'm an architect. I design traps. And you just walked into one. Police sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Grant had sent backup faster than Thomas expected. Bianca made a desperate lunge for the door. Gail fired a warning shot into the ceiling. Bianca stopped. It's over, Thomas said. You failed. Emma and Lucas are safe. Chelsea's network is finished. And you're going to prison for attempted murder. The local police arrested Bianca and her two accomplices. They found weapons, a detailed plan to kill Emma, Lucas, and Kendra, and communications linking them directly to Chelsea. It was enough for federal charges: conspiracy to commit murder, witness intimidation, organized crime. Detective Grant arrived 3 hours later with federal agents. You're lucky you're not dead, he told Thomas. Luck had nothing to do with it, Thomas replied. I built a trap. She walked in. And if she hadn't? Thomas didn't answer. They both knew the truth. He'd taken an enormous risk, gambling that Bianca would follow the same pattern Chelsea had: arrogant, overconfident, underestimating her opponent. The gamble had paid off, but only barely. A week later, Thomas visited Chelsea in prison. It required special permission, multiple security screenings, and a bureaucratic nightmare of paperwork. But he needed to see her face when he told her she'd lost. They sat across from each other in a visiting room with bulletproof glass between them. Chelsea looked older, harder. Prison had stripped away the last remnants of her performance. You came to gloat, she said. I came to tell you it's over. Bianca's in custody. Emma and Lucas are safe. Every person in your network has been arrested or exposed. You lost. Chelsea smiled, cold, empty. Did I? You're here, Thomas. Sitting across from me. Thinking about me. I'm in your head now. Forever. You'll never look at a stranger without wondering if they're part of some scheme. You'll never trust easily again. You'll always be the man who dismantled a criminal network. Always be the architect who built traps instead of buildings. I didn't just steal your identity. I changed who you are. Thomas stood up. You're wrong. You didn't change me. You showed me what I was capable of. And now other people like you will know. There are people who fight back. People who won't be victims. People who will hunt you the way you hunted them. He walked away without looking back. Chelsea called after him, her voice echoing off the concrete walls. This isn't over. But it was. For her. For Thomas, it was a beginning. Chapter 9, The Blueprint. Thomas returned to his glass house on the mesa and spent 3 days alone, thinking. The house no longer felt exposed or vulnerable. It felt like what it had always been, a place of clarity, of vision, of design. Gail visited on the 4th day. How are you holding up? I'm good, Thomas said. And he meant it. The media wants to interview you. Book deals, movie rights, the whole circus. Not interested. I figured. Gail sat across from him. So what now? Back to designing escape rooms and luxury resorts. Thomas was quiet for a moment. I've been thinking about what Chelsea said. About how she changed me. She wasn't entirely wrong. I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago. That's not a bad thing. No, Thomas agreed. It's not. But it means I need to figure out what to do with what I learned. The skills I developed. The connections I made. You want to keep doing this, Gail said. It wasn't a question. People like Chelsea are everywhere. running schemes, hurting people, hiding behind complexity and bureaucracy. The system tries to stop them, but the system has gaps. Sometimes you need someone who can work in those gaps. Someone who thinks like an architect, sees the structure, finds the weaknesses, applies pressure precisely. Gail smiled. You're talking about becoming a vigilante. I'm talking about being a consultant, helping victims fight back, using legal methods, proper channels, but with creativity and precision that law enforcement sometimes lacks. Thomas pulled out his laptop. I've been researching. There are hundreds of cases like mine, identity theft rings, fraud networks, complex conspiracies that destroy lives. Most victims don't have the resources or knowledge to fight back effectively. And you want to help them. I want to design solutions, Thomas corrected. Every problem is a structure. Every structure has weaknesses. I'm just good at finding them. Gail considered this. You'd need a team. Investigators, lawyers, tech people. I already have you. Flattering, but I'm just one person. Then we find others. Thomas opened a document on his laptop. He'd been working on this for days, a blueprint, not for a building, but for an organization. I'm calling it the Architect Initiative, a consulting firm that helps victims of complex fraud schemes. We investigate, we expose, we dismantle. We work with law enforcement when possible, but we're not constrained by jurisdictional boundaries or bureaucratic limitations. That's ambitious. I have the resources, the contacts, the expertise. Thomas looked at Gail. And I have the motivation. Emma and Lucas are safe because we acted fast. But how many other children are in danger right now from people like Chelsea? How many other victims are suffering because no one with the right skills is paying attention? Gail was quiet for a long moment. You're serious about this? Completely. Then count me in. She extended her hand. But on one condition, we do this right. No illegal surveillance, no evidence tampering, no vigilante bullshit. We build cases that hold up in court. We work with the system, not against it. Thomas shook her hand. Agreed. We're architects, not demolition crews. We build structures of truth. The Architect Initiative launched 3 months later. Thomas converted part of his architectural firm's office space into a hub for the new venture. He hired Colin Fry as legal counsel, Gail as chief investigator, and brought in a forensic accountant named Neville Snow who'd worked on white-collar crime for the FBI. Their first client was a man in Texas whose identity had been stolen by a sophisticated ring similar to Chelsea's network. Within 6 weeks, Thomas's team had documented the fraud, identified the perpetrators, and provided evidence that led to multiple arrests. Their second case involved an elderly woman in Florida who'd been defrauded out of her life savings by a fake investment company. Thomas's team traced the money, identified the shell companies, and worked with federal prosecutors to recover most of the stolen funds. Word spread. More clients came, victims of catfishing schemes, business fraud, complex cyber crimes. Each case was different, but Thomas approached them all the same way. Map the structure, find the weaknesses, apply pressure precisely. He was still an architect. He'd just expanded his definition of what could be built. 1 year after Chelsea's conviction, Thomas received a letter. It came from a maximum security prison, written in careful handwriting. Thomas, I heard about your initiative. How noble of you, helping other victims. But here's what you don't understand. For every scheme you dismantle, 10 more spring up. You're bailing water from a sinking ship. I'll be in here for the rest of my life. But my legacy continues. You didn't destroy what I built. You made it stronger. Now everyone knows the methods work. They just have to be more careful. You think you won. But all you did was level up the game. See, Thomas read the letter once, then fed it through his office shredder. Chelsea was trying to poison his victory, trying to convince him that his work was futile. She was wrong. Yes, there would always be predators. Yes, the fight was never truly finished. But that didn't make the individual victories meaningless. Emma and Lucas were alive, safe, growing up with a chance at normal life. The man in Texas had his identity restored. The woman in Florida got her savings back. Those were real people, real lives, real victories. And Thomas understood something about architecture that Chelsea never could. You don't build a cathedral in a day. You lay one stone at a time, carefully, precisely, with patience and vision. Eventually, the cathedral rises. Eventually, the light streams through the stained glass. Eventually, the structure stands. 5 years after the trial, Thomas Horton stood in his glass house and looked at the wall he'd installed in his office. It was covered with photos. Emma and Lucas, now teenagers, smiling at a school event. The man from Texas, reunited with his family. The woman from Florida, holding a check for her recovered savings. Dozens of other faces, victims who'd become survivors, who'd fought back and won. His phone rang. A new client, calling with a desperate story about fraud and betrayal and a system that seemed designed to protect predators instead of victims. Thomas listened. Then he opened his laptop and started designing the solution, mapping the structure, identifying the weaknesses, planning the precise application of pressure that would bring it all crashing down. He was an architect, and he'd learned that the most important structures weren't built from steel and glass. They were built from justice, exposure, and the determined belief that no one was too powerful to be stopped, no system too complex to be dismantled, no victim too isolated to be helped. All you needed was someone willing to find the blueprint, someone willing to exploit the cracks, someone willing to be patient, precise, and relentless. Someone like Thomas Horton. Outside his window, the desert stretched to the horizon, vast, empty, beautiful. He'd once chosen this isolation to escape the world. Now he understood, you couldn't escape. You could only decide whether to hide from the darkness or fight it. Thomas had made his choice, and the next trap was already being built. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.